The most important thing in this matchup is that it was kind of just Giratina wars back and forth. It's almost always better to pass. I really love Pokestop. This is like the only matchup I think where you play with like a really weird bench. Like the way that people lose this matchup is by using Theorem too early. I think that's crazy, and then you just win the game on the spot.
Since Isaiah Bradner just got top 8 at the World Championships with Regidrago VSTAR, I got him on the channel to teach us everything he knows about Regidrago. He explains how he deals with every single relevant matchup in the format with Regidrago, but to start, he talks about all the possible deck list choices for Regidrago. Enjoy this Regidrago VSTAR guide. Right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the list, the Regidrago list in general, and we can start with the list that you played to the tournament. And the first thing I want to talk about is the attackers. So like you ended up running no Goodra and 2 Dragapult. I think that's sort of the main contention with the attackers is like this Goodra. You decided not to run it. What are your thoughts on Goodra and the attackers in general?
So I ended up not playing Gudra. I of course heavily considered it. Like, I mean, I played a ton of games with the deck originally before Worlds. I started playing like a ton of games just on ladder in the last format, and I found out like I basically never used Gudra. Like the only time that I wanted to use Gudra was sometimes against Gardevoir. Like you could Gudra to stop a Drifloon knockout, but as I started playing more in the new format, I literally never found the time I wanted to Gudra. I always wanted to Dragapult or Giratina my opponent's active, and the more that I played, I just did not have situations come up where I wanted to Gudra. And so it was pretty easy to cut it for the second Dragapult. I even like as we got closer and closer to the event, I continued to try slotting Gudra in somewhere to see if it made an impact in matchups like Mirror or for example against Gardevoir, or against Iron Thorns. But while it was best against Iron Thorns, it wasn't good enough to really matter. And it just never came up against any other matchup. Even against Mirror, which I know some people like there is a game plan that you can go for with Gudra and Mirror, but in all the games that I tested, it did not end up being significant. And so I decided to trust my sample space, and that's why I didn't end up playing it. I played the second Dragapult because, like I said, I wanted to use Dragapult in pretty much every matchup. I think that you should have 200 damage attackers. If you don't, like if you only have one Dragapult and no Gudra or Haxorus, then it can get pretty awkward because your only attacker is Tina in some situations, and that's just not enough to sustain you through the game. So I think you need 2 attackers that do like a 200 base damage, and from my testing, the second Dragapult was just more significant than the Gudra.
Yeah, interesting. I feel like yeah, I mean, we played Goodra the event and felt really, really good in Mirror just in general as like a blocker to the Giratina getting one shot back. Is it because you don't think like that is really relevant, or like what's your more in-depth thoughts on like its impact in the Mirror?
Yeah, so a few things. The first thing is that Gudra only works if you get the first attack with it into a 2-prizer. If you can do that, then you're in a good spot. For example, like if you Gudra, like Gudraing a Teal Mask is ideal, right? You Gudra a Teal Mask, and then the next turn you can like go Tina knock out for 2 prize cards, and then you can Howlucha take 2 with something, right? And that's really good. And then you Gudra so your active doesn't die to Giratina, right? If you can Gudra a Teal Mask, it's really good. If you can Gudra a Regidrago VSTAR, it's also pretty good. Because then you can go boss Dragapult, and like we already mentioned, if you Gudra, you can't get Giratina back, which is definitely the best part about Gudra, right? It allows you to do 200 while saving your energies. But I found that if I attacked first in Mirror, I was almost always winning anyways. And if you Gudra into a 1-prizer, then if your opponent is good, you should still lose because they can Giratina you for 280, and then they can Gust Teal Mask twice and take all 6 in one turn. If you play some healing card, like someone's played Turo, then you can kind of play around this play, although it's still hard to find Turo, especially because like a lot of the time, or a reasonable amount of the time, if you have to V-Star early, then you don't have the option to pick it back up. But yeah, basically I found that because you would only win the prize trade if you attacked first, and I was really confident winning the prize trade if I attacked first anyways, that it was a win more card. It definitely made the games feel better. It was easier to win if you got the first attack, but I thought I would do that anyways, and it didn't really give me a chance to come back. I mean, it gave me a little bit of a chance to come back. My opponent could miss a Gust, but reasonably they would hit that anyways. And so I thought it was better put towards a card that was good in other matchups or just in general good for consistency.
Sure. Okay, I can definitely see that. All right, I think we're gonna move on from that to like the one of attackers. So like or one of Pokemon, I would say. So like the Radiant Zard, the Holucha, and you ran Cleffa as well. Like these sort of cards. We saw some people didn't run Radzard. Holucha was more common, and the Cleffa was definitely not common. If you just want to run through
Yeah.
those, starting with Radzard.
Yeah, sure. So I actually think the worst one. Well, starting with Radzard, sorry. So Radiant Charizard was put in the deck for the Raging Bolt matchup. That was pretty much the reason that it's in the deck. It also has a lot of application in Mirror. I found that whenever I tested Mirror, that was the matchup where Radzard came up the like. Radzard was the most impactful card in Mirror. I found it was the matchup where, like, as of tech cards I could play for the Mirror, Radzard came up the most. It doesn't come up in games wherever you set up a checkmate board state, right? Some games you try to take all 6 prize cards in one turn, but there are also a lot of games I found where it was kind of just Giratina Wars back and forth. And in those games, having the ability to Radzard, so I didn't have to set up a third Regidrago, was really huge. And then obviously Radzard is kind of in the deck for the Raging Bolt matchup. That's like the matchup it's really, really good in. Against Bolt, after they take a 2 prize knockout, you can respond with Radzard on turn 2, and then you're in a pretty good position. If you don't have that, then your game playing gets really, really shaky. So those are the 2 main matchups that it was good in. It also randomly comes up sometimes where if you V-Star with bad cards, you want a 1 energy attacker to close the game, or you can use a 1 prizer to throw your opponent's prize trade off. But that almost always happens in either Mirror or the Raging Bolt matchup. But from all my testing, it was significant in both those matchups, and they were 2 matchups I wanted to be ready for. Moving on to Holucha. Holucha was actually like probably the worst card in my deck. Me, Grant, Shen, and Rune Hermines all played the same 60. Me and Grant both finished top 16. And Grant convinced me to add Holucha the day before. We spent a long time trying to find a card that was good for Mirror, and we couldn't really find anything. And Holucha had some implications. Like it came up in some games, and it was the best across like the general field, and so we decided to play it. But I don't think the card's amazing. If I were to cut a card, it would be Holucha. I feel like it helps you the most in the matchups which you're already super favored in, which are like Charizard and Gardevoir.
Yep.
And so I wasn't really worried about shoring up those matchups, but just because it had implications against like the entire field. Like sometimes it's good in Mirror, and it sometimes is good in the Lugia, and then it is good in the Charizard and Gardevoir. That's why I ended up playing it. I think I used it most for retreating into whenever I pledged Cleffa. I think I did that more. I used the ability like twice, but I retreated into it I think 3 times because I priced Cleffa. So the card was okay. Like I said, it's good against Charizard and Gardevoir, but I don't really like it because those are your favorite matchups anyways. I ended up adding it because it was good against Lugia, and I just wanted to shore up that matchup. But with Lugia going down, I think I could be pretty easily convinced to cut Holucha. Finally, on to Cleffa. Cleffa was, like you said, the least played of the tech cards, but I think that's crazy. I think the card actually is one of the main reasons that the deck is so good. I wasn't actually on Cleffa until kind of recently before the event, which is kind of embarrassing because Xander Pero was telling me about it for like so long. But I ended up getting there. The card is so good because in a lot of your matchups, you don't want to attack first, right? Like, we'll get into this later, but in so many of your matchups, just attacking first and taking a 1 prize knockout is allowing your opponent to like take advantage of their comeback cards, or allowing your opponent to get the first 2 prize knockout, and those are really bad. And so what you want to do instead is you kind of just want to sit back and use Cleffa to build up your hand. If you don't have Cleffa, you don't have a great option to do that on like going second. And even if you go first, a lot of games, you don't want to burn your V-Star on turn 2. And having Cleffa gives you a really good option just to retreat into Cleffa, draw more cards, and then save your V-Star for later. Like, because I had Cleffa, I was able to go really positive into my mirrors because there were times where I could either like attack for a 1 prize knockout, or I could use Cleffa, or I could use my V-Star to try and dig for a 2 prize knockout. But I knew that if I used my V-Star, I would be overextending, and so I would just go into Cleffa and fill up my hand. It's also really big in the decks like Charizard, it's really big into Iron Thorns, like you'll probably hear it come up in almost every matchup that I talk about. So the card is just generally insane, giving you a consistency boost. The deck doesn't have anything it wants to do going second, so you can retreat in Cleffa, draw 7 cards, and you'll be in a much better spot for the rest of the game.
Yeah. That's fair. I think that the main justification for cutting Cleffa is like a space issue if you don't think it's like impactful enough. But yeah, I mean, like I've definitely been convinced more on Cleffa. It seems really good, for sure. Yeah. All right. So the next thing I want to ask you about is some other sort of like niche changes that people have made. So like the next one is like Ogerpon versus Pheasantipity. Like Pheasantipity as a card in general. I think that not everyone was playing Pheasantipity at the event, and why, if you do think that Pheasantipity is important.
Serendipity is another card that I added really late in the testing process because I was testing for a long time and I did not need it. Like I was going extremely positive against the entire field without having Pheasantipity in my deck. And so I just thought the card was unnecessary. I thought I didn't really have a ton of bench space for it, but I added it in like as I was grinding like 2 days before the event, I ended up adding it in to try it, and it never left my deck after I did. I think that what Pheasantipity does is there are a lot of games, or at least a reasonable amount of games, where you don't need Pheasantipity or you won't bench Pheasantipity, right? Maybe you Squawk on turn one and you need Mew, and then your board just doesn't have room for Serendipity. And whenever those games happen, it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that this means you do not need Serendipity in your deck. Like I fell into that for a long time. But the reason that Serendipity is so good is because it saves you in the games where you don't have those good starts. So in the games where you can't Squawk, Serendipity and like enables you to get an attack on turn two. Like if you have Serendipity and you like I don't know attach an energy to a Regidrago V, and then your opponent takes a two-prize knockout in like a Raging Bolt or Miraidon or something. Having Pheasantipity is like so much higher of a chance that you're going to pop off that next turn, that you're going to get that turn to attack. Or, for example, in Mirror or against Charizard, matchups where if you go aggressive, they're probably going to Iono you back. Pheasantipity allows you to be okay with not squawking early and not discarding a bunch of your deck and thinning out your deck. You can have a thicker deck because you get 3 more cards every turn. And if they kill the Pheasantipity, that's probably fine because you have a fully loaded Regidrago VSTAR. So I just think the card's needed in general for the reason I said. I didn't think so for a while, but Pheasantipity allows you to win the games where you draw poorly in the opening turns because it just gives you such a consistency of draw on the bench, and no other one card swings your late game that much in the matchups where you don't draw well early.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's actually the exact same argument I was making to the group that was like kind of split on it as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Brent ended up not playing Pheasantipity. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw Brent didn't play, and like I said, I was pretty split as well. A lot of people thought the card was just broken on the deck, which now I see why. But I do think there are a lot of arguments like against it. Like you don't, like I said, like a lot of games you don't need it. That's probably the biggest reason why I was hesitant. But it is just so good. It makes your matchups easier to win, and it allows you to draw a little bit poorly and still win the matchup. So definitely a good card in the deck. Definitely better than like anything else in that slot. Fourth Ogerpon's fine, but like I mean, you don't really need a fourth Ogerpon, I don't think. I mean, I didn't need it, so.
Yeah, I think Brent's logic was you replace a spot on your bench with Ogerpon, and then you thin your energies out, and then you have less cards in deck in general. So, like, you're kind of getting some compensation, and then obviously, as you said, you don't use it every game. But, yeah, I would say majority of the time still worth it. Yeah, all right, let's move.
I think, sorry, one last thing. Yeah, I think Pheasantipity wins you a lot of games that are or at least wins you games that are unwinnable without it. I don't think any other card does that. Like, there are other cards that are probably better for your consistency, but Pheasantipity will allow you to win games you could not win without it. And so I think that's why it's so valuable in the slot. But yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And you kind of need, like, Ogerpon or Pheasantipity, in my opinion, in that spot. Because, like, yeah, just, like, having, like, the 2-prize Pokemon, like, the draws cards. Yeah.
I agree.
Sure. All right. And then, so let's move on to the trainers. Now, the first thing I wanted to ask you about is like probably the most interesting part of your list compared to other lists is like the Rod Stretcher Superior debate. You ran 2 Super Rod. Most lists were not 2 Super Rod. In fact, some lists ran 0 Super Rod. Yeah, what do you think about Super Rod and that sort of split?
Yeah, double Super Rod was really, really good. I mean, the biggest thing is it gave me a space. Like, I was able to play one more card in my deck because I only played 2 Rod, no Superior, no Stretcher. If I played any other split, then I almost certainly would have had to put 3 recovery cards in. Like, for almost the entirety of my testing, I had double Superior and Stretcher, but then shout out to my boy Keon. Keon kept telling me that double Rod was good, and I told him he was terrible. I told him there was no way. And then I just put it in my deck and started playing games, and then after, like, 3 hours of playing, I hadn't missed the Rods. They'd never been bad. They're very different, but they were fine. And that was enough to sell me on the Super Rod. Like, I continued playing a ton of games, and the Rods barely ever hurt me. And as long as Super Rod is manageable, then it's better because it gives you a deck slot. That was pretty much my logic. It also has, like, Super Rod is also good in the deck because it gives you a little bit more redundancy, right? By having double Super Rod, it doesn't really matter if you research one early. Like it can be difficult if you discard both of them, or if you like research one and you can star away one. But as long as you have access to one Rod, and also you can get it back with your V-Star. Rod gives you more flexibility than any other card does in that slot, because Rod can get back multiple Pokemon, or it can get back one Pokemon in multiple energies. No other card can do that. Superior is really strong because it gets back 4 energy, but if you need like Radiant Charizard Fire, then it can't do that at the end of the game, whereas Super Rod can, or you can't load your deck with Radiant Charizard Fire, which Rod can. There are definitely ways, like I said, in which Superior and Stretcher are stronger. They directly go to your hand, which is really nice, which is why I thought that they would be better for a long time. But after playing the deck, having the ability to rod back in resources before your researcher squawk is really, really good. And then also, you're just able to make it work, and so it's worth the deck space. One thing that I do want to mention is that there were a lot of people that played 2 fire instead of they played 2 fire instead of 3. And if you play 2 fire, then so I think the best argument for not playing Rod is going to 2 fire and then playing double superior structure. You can't really play 2 fire with 2 Rod, because if you do that, then if you prize or discard a fire, after your opponent knocks out your Regidrago, in order to attack, you have to find a Rod, because you have to go Rod and then be able to Vessel back the guys. It's just too hard to find fire energy consistently. But if you play double superior stretcher, then it's a much more reasonable thing. If you play 2 fire, you discard 1, you have 3 outs to directly get the fire back into your hand. But I felt like I wanted to have more fire on my board throughout the game. And so I felt like it was more valuable to have that third fire energy as opposed to the extra recovery card for energy, which was the main debate. So that was kind of my logic for Rod. I didn't have it for a while, but whenever I played it at the end, I realized it gave me a free slot. And I thought that that free slot, even just being used towards the third fire energy, which it kind of did if I transition, was more valuable because I didn't want to risk either prizing fire energy or having unfortunate discards. I thought it'd give me more consistency to always have something to Vessel for throughout the game.
Fair. I think you covered everything that I would want to ask about that, and everything I want to say about that as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the supporter split.
Yeah.
You ran 4 research, 2 Iono, 2 boss, 4 research everyone runs, but sometimes people run an extra Iono or an extra boss or Turo as well. You alluded to Turo a little bit earlier, but what do you think about like the supporter split and like what's worth it, what's not?
Yeah, so the big thing about the supporter split is that I played what you need. I thought for a long time that 3 bosses was needed. Like, that was another thing that probably most people had in their Regidrago list. I thought it was crazy whenever people were cutting down to 2. But I went to 2, and then it was fine. That was kind of my experience with this deck a lot, if you've been paying attention. Like, I thought something wouldn't work, and then I tried it, and then it was completely fine. Like, the thing that I realized, and why I went down to 2 boss originally, and then like my theory was right, is this deck almost always plays Prime Catcher at least once, usually twice. Or at least probably over half the time twice. And if you're playing Prime Catcher twice, then the odds you need another Gust are pretty low. Or the odds you need 2 Gusts are basically 0. Like, gusting 4 times in a game never happens. Gusting 3 times in a game is reasonable. But you could definitely do that with only 2 boss. Like, you can thin your deck enough where you can find that boss on that turn, or if you need to, you can usually V-Star back Prime Catcher boss. And so you just don't need access to 3 boss in your deck. It's just not going to come up enough. That was kind of the same idea with Third Iono. Third Iono is a little bit stronger because it both increases your consistency and it allows you to like have it on the games that you're trying to come back. Also, with Third Iono, whenever you need it, your deck isn't as thin because you usually want it like on turn 2, turn 3 after your opponent's taken a 2-prize knockout, and so having it in your hand is more important. And so I think that there's probably a better argument for Third Iono than there is for Third Boss. But the more that I tested, I was just always fine with the 2 Iono. Against decks like Raging Bolt and Mirror, Ionoing after they take a 2-prize knockout is really good, but it's not essential. The most important Iono is the next turn, and you can almost always secure that one. So I felt like my deck was consistent enough without the third Iono, and I didn't feel like I really had much of a reason to want the third boss, and so I settled on the 4-2-2. I did briefly consider Turo, mainly for the Mirror, being able to heal, but as I said, it was too inconsistent. It didn't actually heal in the Mirror as much as I wanted it to, and I don't really think it's very good in other matchups. I mean, it has some niche uses, but it really isn't very good, and so I didn't consider it for too long. I would have played like I think Iono is the one I would play next, and then Boss. Although Iono and Boss are pretty close, I think, just because while Iono has more logic, Boss is a more powerful card. There are more games where you want to use Boss, and so having a third one can be good. But like I said, I played a lot with it. You don't need it, and if you don't need it in this deck, then you probably shouldn't play it.
I would say the main justification, well, 2 main justifications for a more Ionos is like, obviously it's a consistency card. You ran Cleffa, and I think people running 3, we ran 3 Iono.
Yeah.
As like extra consistency there, and also it's consistency that doesn't burn all your resources, which kind of can be important some of the times, like fine on turn 1 when you have really bad hands. So yeah. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the stadiums. So you ran PokeStop, which was pretty unusual, and Temple as well. What do you think about the stadiums?
Yeah, I really love Pokestop. Like that is one of my favorite cards in the deck. I think I was like one of the only ones to run Pokestop. Me and Grant were. I don't know if anyone else ran it. I mean, I'm sure someone ran it. Like it was a known card in the deck, but no one else really decided it was good enough. I don't think. Um, but the card is really really good. So Regidrago is a deck that is a combo based deck. You have a lot you want to do on your turns going through the game, right? Like your matchups are kind of formulaic in a way. Like in Mirror, you want to go like 2-2-2. Sometimes you change it up. You want to go 2-2-2. Against Zard, you want to go 2-2-2. Against Raging Bolt, you want to go like Radzard, right? So your deck has a very specific game plan in a bunch of matchups, and you really want to execute that game plan. Now, Pokestop allows you to do that more than any other card you could put in that spot, and there's a few reasons for that. The first one is that Pokestop is essentially like a draw 3 in this deck. You might not be able to keep all the cards, but you're looking at 3 cards to find the ones that you need, right? Which are like Nest Ball, Energy Switch, Ultra Ball, Super Rod sometimes. So it gives you a 3-card dig in order to find those cards, which is huge. Like, I mean, it could be an additional Pheasant. It gets like an additional Pheasantipity that, you know, it's a stadium card. And so no one card enables you that much dig. The second reason is that decks right now don't play stadium cards. Like they do, but they really don't play very many. So if you play Pokestop, it almost always stays in play for at least 2 turns. Like in Mirror, if you're ahead, you can slam down the stop, and then your opponent has to find their 1 Sinnoh in order to counter it. And they don't really want to play their 1 Sinnoh, right? Against Charizard, your opponent has to find their 1 Vacuum or 1 Clap Stadium. And they're already under so much pressure to find other things. Like against Gardevoir, they have to find one of their 1 or 2 Artisan, which they might have played on turn 1. So like just putting this card in play gives you so much consistency because your opponent is going to have to struggle. They're going to struggle to find a counter stadium. And if they don't find a counter stadium, they're just continuing to give you 3 more cards every single turn. So it's a really, really good consistency card. It enables you to pull off your combos. But I think the biggest thing is that it's just the one of is such an impactful and powerful card that no other one card you can put in that slot gives you like as much consistency or reach as you go through your deck. Temple was fine. It was in my deck for Lugia. It was good to have another counter stadium that wasn't stop. Sometimes you want to counter your opponent's stadium and play Iono, and if you play Pokestop, then they get to draw 3 more cards, and so you don't really want to do that. So like, I don't know, countering Artisan or in Mirror, replacing my own Pokestop, I did that a lot, so my opponent couldn't draw more cards. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the card. I would 100% still play it going forward. I really love it. It was one of my favorite cards in the deck.
Sure. I think also something you didn't mention is like using Temple against like Raging Bolt as well is a big deal there.
Sure. Yeah. Stopping them from having Pokestop. Any matchup where you're disrupting your opponent, I mean, being able to put in a stadium that basically does nothing in play is pretty big. And it happens against Thorns a reasonable amount too. Like I think I templed the Thorns I hit, and then they didn't have a stadium, so I gained another turn.
Yeah, sure. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is energy, but I think you covered it for the most part when we talked about the super rods. So I think we'll move straight into first or second, what you go first and second against. Yeah, so I mean, I think you can confirm that we're probably going second blind, but the main question is there any matchups that you think you're going second?
Wait, you go second blind?
Oh, first blind.
Okay, I was confused. I was like, whoa. I was not expecting that. It's like not a crazy take, but not expecting. So I think you go first in. Okay, no. So you want to go first in every matchup except for maybe Miraidon. I'm not sure on that one. At least that's my opinion. I think you want to go first against everything else. There's a lot of people that think you want to go second against Raging Bolt, but that is bad. You should definitely go first against Bolt. I'll explain more if we talk about that matchup later.
Yep.
Every other matchup you want to go first. There are some times like I almost thought you wanted to go second against Gardevoir. Like that matchup going second is actually pretty good, and you get to draw more cards. If you Dragon Bolt on turn 2, you usually win the game, regardless of if you do that going first or second. But I still think going first is better, and in every other matchup there really isn't much of an argument. Miraidon is the scariest one because if you go first, they can almost always go 220 on turn 1, and them nuking your lone Regidrago V is really, really scary. And so I opted second against all the Miraidons that I played. Granted, it was not a matchup I tested a ton, and so I could see going first still being optimal. Like, if you go first, then it's a lot harder for them to get a knockout, like their first knockout to be without burning V-Star. If you go second, it's pretty reasonable that they get a two-prize knockout without burning their V-Star. If you go first and you get down like a reasonable setup, they probably have to burn their V-Star, especially to take out your Regidrago V. And so I could definitely see through more testing going first being better and hoping that you get a decent enough setup where you can respond to if they do get the turn one nuke. I know that Miraidons chose second against me, which is one reason that I chose second against them. But as I was playing it out in my head, I was not sure which was better. I don't know what your opinions are on that matchup, but everywhere else, I chose first across the board, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Miraidon, I think there's the same thing. We didn't like fully know if we were supposed to be first or second. So like we were up, at least I opted second. I don't know if anyone else in my group played any or did anything against what they did against Miraidon. But yeah, the main one in contention is definitely Raging Bolt. And honestly, I think between the group we had two split opinions on first or second.
Okay.
But me and Brent were opting first, so maybe we're on the right side of history there. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think you probably second against Lax.
Yeah.
I didn't mention that. I just realized, but I'm pretty sure you want to go second in that matchup. Although even that one is debatable.
Yeah, because it's like they get the Rotom and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. Honestly, I'd probably still go first. Like you're gonna try to go fast in that matchup anyways, and so you might as well like give them one less draw. Like if they open only with a Nest Ball and they go Nest Ball Rotom, you'd much rather have gone first than second. So I'm pretty sure I would have opted. I in my testing I opted first, although that one was at least I think I started opting second and then switched to first. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I would choose first against everything except for maybe Miraidon, which I would lean second towards, but I'm not even positive if that's right.
Sure. Yeah, I Snorlax, I don't really know, but it's also the matchup where it's like not really that relevant as well. So in my opinion, at least. So, but yeah, let's move on to the first matchup that we're going to talk about, which is the Zard EX matchup. See, I feel like I just want to ask you, like, how do you deal with this matchup, and what are your tips to like taking prizes? What are you trying to take prizes on in this matchup?
Yeah, so the most important thing in this matchup is that you want to go for a 2-2-2 prize plan. So there are lots of different ways to do that. You have Dragapult, which almost always happens. You have Rotom that they can bench, which that's 2 prize cards. Fish is 2 prize cards. Festivity is 2 prize cards. You can one-shot a Charizard with the Teal Mask, that's 2 prize cards. You can one-shot a Pidgeot with Giratina, that's 2 prize cards. So you have a lot of different ways to take 2 prize cards. The most important thing is that you are taking 2 prize cards and that you have a vision to take 2 every turn. So in this matchup, I don't think it particularly matters what you kill as long as you're getting 2 prize cards and your board is like reasonably set up. Like I think it's more important to value your board setup over taking out their big threats. If you have the option to kill Pidgeot, then killing Pidgeot is pretty good. But like especially because the scariest thing in this matchup is if they have some crazy play where they like, discard all their 2 prize. Like they can discard their Pidgeot and then retreat off their Charizard, and then it's pretty hard for you to take a 2 prize knockout. But even in those situations, their board is so terrible, like you can probably just win the game by playing Iono. But I would approach the matchup by trying to take 2 prize cards every turn. Importantly, if you can only take 1 prize card, it's almost always better to pass. If you take the 1 prize card early, then that activates their counter catcher. And then they can go counter catcher, take 2 prize cards. And whenever Zard gets a lead against you, it's really hard to come back. There are some things you can do, like you can sometimes cure them for 3, or you can Dragapult for 3 if they have like a 70 HP and a Festivity or something. You can, with Howlucha, Dragapult for 3. But I found in my testing that if I was only taking 1 prize card, it was significantly better just to go Cleffa, build my hand up, and then try to go 2-2-2 the next few turns. So honestly, that's most of my strategy against Charizard. It was really just focused on taking 2 prize cards. Having multiple Teal Mask powered up is really important because you're probably going to need to kill a Zard with Teal Mask. And so if you can, leaving 1 energy on 2 Teal Masks is infinitely better than leaving 2 on 1 because they can Gust kill that one. I don't think I had too much other that I was trying to do other than set up my board consistently and take 2 every turn. If they play Hero's Cape, it's a little bit more complicated, which some people did play, but it's not that bad. You just have to make sure that whenever you Dragapult, you almost always do this anyways. You want to put 10 damage on all the little 70 HP guys in case they don't evolve one of them. That's additionally important against Zard with Hero's Cape because if you have 10 on a Charizard when it's Hero's Caped, you only need 4 energy on your Ogerpon as opposed to 5. And that's like a really big difference. Like getting to 4 is pretty reasonable. 5 is really difficult. And so I guess I would prioritize even more attacking with Dragapult in that matchup. Or sorry, if they have Hero's Cape, because then you can put the damage spread. But I guess one last thing is I heavily prioritize prize cards in this matchup over board state. For example, if I have a choice, like sometimes you just blow your opponent off the board with doing stuff. Like if you're gonna Dragapult kill both Charmander, obviously you want to do that. But let's say that I was like Dragapulting and I could kill Duskull or maybe even Pidgey and a Charmander, or I could kill like Rotom and a Pidgey or a Duskull, for example. Like I could take out a Charmander, make their board weaker. I could take out a Rotom. I almost always went for the Rotom. I would go for the Rotom. Just taking prize cards faster should be the aim in this matchup. You have a lot of really good ways to take prize cards, and your opponent almost always has to play into them, like one-shotting with Teal Mask or benching Pheasantipede, so another two-prizer, or Pidgeot. And so just taking as many prize cards early allows the game to be the fastest, and it takes out the ways that you most lose the game, which is stuff like the Radzard. So take 2 prize cards every turn, take prize cards as fast as you can, and then don't take the first prize card unless you are heavily like hurting their board. Like killing their only Charmander is fine. Killing their only Pidgey is like okay if they don't have a big hand. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. You can also set up games where you win with Kyurem if you put 60 on Lumineon, which they bench a reasonable amount of the time. Like you can take a knockout 60 on Lumineon and then you can Kyurem for 3 or 4 prize cards. So there are still ways to win if you take a 1 prize knockout, but it is generally better to use Cleffa, build your hand, and then go 2-2-2.
Sure, and you don't think that changes at all if they have like a really good start with like Duskull and stuff on turn 1? Don't like consider taking 1 prizes or anything like that?
Well, if they have Duskull, you can almost always take 2 because you can kill the Duskull. That was one reason why the 2-2-2 works so well, is because some people play like the Bravery Charm or the Hero's Cape, which like makes it a little bit more awkward.
Sure.
But if they don't have that in their deck, then they have no way to pressure you. Okay, one important thing is if you don't have to, not benching you or Squawk is like pretty reasonable. Like you're like the games you Squawk on turn 1, you just have to Squawk, right? So it doesn't really apply to that. But for benching Mew, there are some times where you have a choice whether or not to bench Mew on turn 2. And if you're not taking a prize card, don't bench it because then they max at 180. And if they're maxing at 180, then they can't pressure you because if they bench Duskull, then you have an easy access to 2 prize cards with killing Duskull and something else with Dragapult. And if they don't bench Duskull, then they're never going to be able to take advantage of that 180. So if they get a Duskull down on turn 1 with a bunch of other things, maybe I would consider taking a 1 prize knockout because, like you said, they can pop the Dusknoir and take a knockout with Charizard. But I think I would still favor setting up my board, and then if they go for the huge Duskull knockout, I would just hope that their board would be like they wouldn't get their Pidgeot out, and so then I could take advantage of that the next turn or something. But I guess it gets a little more weird if they can like Bravery Charm their Duskull, but that's still a ton for them to draw on turn 2,
Sure.
As opposed to if I take a knockout, then they get Pheasantipede, they can Candy Pidgeot counter catcher, and then I feel like I'm in definitely a scarier spot where they have Pidgeot up and ahead 2 prize cards.
Your situation was slightly different to ours because we had Gudra and 1 Dragapult, so there were definitely games where like we couldn't. Our only 1 prize is Gudra. So that makes things a little bit different. The last thing I wanted to talk about with the Zard matchup is I presume you hadn't thought about it pre-Worlds, unless maybe you had, but Rabsca. Do you have any thoughts on how to deal with Rabsca in the matchup and how that changes things?
Yeah, I had thought about it pre-Worlds. I had Rabsca in some decks, but not in Charizard. I did have Evo in Charizard though. I had Evo into Pidgeotto, which is different than Rabsca, but similar kind of thing. The thing about Rabsca is that Tor does not play Manaphy, and so I've played the matchup 0 times, but I was pretty confident I was going to win if I hit him. Him not playing Manaphy allows you to do a few different things. The first thing is that you can target down the Rabsca pretty aggressively. So if he Evos into Rabsca, then your best play is going to be on the next turn. I'm pretty sure. Thinking about it. You want to Time Catcher or Boss, and you can knock out the Rabsca with Dragapult. Now, that does take a 1 prize knockout, but what that does is that eliminates all of his protection from Dragapult and Kyurem for the rest of the game. And if you do that, then your prize map just opens like wide up. Like they're almost certainly going to bench Pheasantipity. You can kill Pheasantipity in any like one prizer. You can cure him for multiple prize cards. But even if you aren't lucky enough to get that boss kill on the Rabsca, then you can still set up for a Cologne play where you can wipe their board the same you can with Manaphy. It is definitely stronger because if you take a one prize knockout, then like you aren't able to set up Dragapult damage, and so like it's a lot harder to take the first two prize knockout, I guess, because you can't just Hawlucha for two, right? And there's no Pidgey for you to take advantage of. But I think that how you should respond to that is you should still wait to take that first one prize knockout. Like if you're taking a one prize knockout because of Rabsca, it's probably better to Cleffa and then go like boss Cologne Curum or boss kill. I don't actually think Tord played Rotom, but if they bench Luminion, boss kill Luminion or boss kill Pidgeot. So I think in the same way you play slow, you don't need to Dragapult every game. But play slow, and if you have a chance to boss kill it, then taking that one prize knockout is actually fine because that guaranteed opens you up to Kyurem and Dragapult for additional prize cards the rest of the game. Unless they Thornton, but that's pretty difficult. So early on in the game, you shouldn't be too worried about that. Those were at least my initial thoughts, where it doesn't really change too much when I play on a 1-1-1, but or sorry, 2-2-2. But if I have to go for one prize card, killing the Rabsca is pretty good because it allows me to cure him the rest of the game to set up damage.
Sure, yeah. I have not.
I don't know if there were other thoughts that you had.
I have also played 0 games of the matchup, so yeah, that was roughly what we came up with the day of Worlds when we saw his deck as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's time we move into the next matchup. That will be Lugia. So we have the Temple in the deck for this matchup. But I feel like the way that you take prizes in this matchup can actually be extremely complicated. And like different people I've talked to have said different things about this matchup. So how do you feel about like sort of taking prizes in this matchup?
Yeah, Lugia was one of my top choices for the event for a while because I thought it had a really good Regidrago matchup. But as I went closer to the event, I started going favored when I played Regidrago with Temple, and I just couldn't play Lugia at that point, right? Like people are going to play Temple in their deck, but I almost played Lugia, so I had a lot of experience against different versions of this matchup. And the easiest way you win is by going 2-2-2, and that happens a good amount of games. I mean, if you go first and you take a 2-prize knockout on turn 2, there will almost always be 3 2-prize Pokemon for you to kill throughout the game. Like, your opponent has to bench 2 Lugia if you go first. They pretty much have to respect the Prime Catcher. And that means that they either have to start Lugia or they have to start a Minccino. And a reasonable amount of the time, they start an Iron Hands or a Pheasantipity or a Luminion or any other 2-prizer in their deck. And if they do that, they need 2 Lugia down and a Pheasantipity, and you can just go Tina, and you can win the game. You have to find Sinnoh at some point to stop Legacy, but you have like your entire deck you can draw, so that's not too difficult. So that's the easiest way you win, is by going 2-2-2. Or if they miss a Minccino earlier, they have to bench Wordier, bang, that's 2 more prize cards, right? So it just makes them, if you go first, they have to draw incredibly well to stay in the game, as long as you can get a turn 2 attack with Tina. But a lot of games you can't do that, right? There are a lot of games where that doesn't happen. And these games, there are like so many different ways to approach taking prize cards. I think in my one game that I had against Lugia, the way that I won. So I won my game 1 after he boss killed my lone Regidrago on turn 2 with Lugia. I ended up like clefing, and then I went Kyurem to damage the Archeops, and I Dragapulted, removing all of the Archeops from the. I went Kyurem, Dragapult, and then I took 4 off of that. Yeah, okay, yeah, I Kyuremed, Dragapulted, taking 4, and then I Tina for my last 2. But anyways, there's a lot of different paths in this matchup, right? So I think the most important thing is knowing the different plays that you can do. So with Hawlucha, you can Dragapult 200 into a Lugia VSTAR or any 2-prizer, and then put 30 on both Archeops. And then you can Hawlucha, putting 10 on both, and Kyurem taking 4 prize cards on whatever 2-prizer you hit, and both of the Archeops. So in a lot of games, that's going to be a good line, because if you're going 2-2-2 or you're trying to take 6 prize cards in 3 turns, that's a way that you can do that without having to play boss on every turn. So it gives you some flexibility where maybe you have to research on the first turn. Well, usually there's a 2-prizer in the active on the first turn, so that doesn't matter. But maybe you have to research on the second turn or on the third turn, and so allowing yourself like the ability to miss a turn of playing boss is really big. So the Kyurem play is really good, or at least pretty good. Another thing you can do is like you can Kyurem a Luminion and a Lugia VSTAR, and then you can knock out the Lugia VSTAR and Luminion. You can take 4 prize cards that way. I guess the most important thing that you want to do in this matchup, like the way that you can win games when you're behind, is force your opponent to play boss multiple turns in a row. and if you can, go around gift energy. And so the best way you force your opponent to play boss is by removing Mincino. That was what I did in the other game that I won against Lugia. I only played one, Lugia. But what I did was I cure him, I killed the Mincino, and I put 110 on Archeops and then 110 on Lugia. And then they benched Mincino, and then I chased the Mincino, knocked it out, and knocked out the Lumineon. So at this point, I was down to what? I was down to 2 prize cards left because I cured Mincino, and then I Dragon Pulted Mincino and Lumineon, and then I finished off the game by Dragon Pulting some other one prizer and the Archeops, I think. And so that's a pretty reasonable line. Like Kyurem should almost always allow you to clear their board of Mincinos early, which then means your active can't die, which then means they have to boss multiple turns of the game, which is not impossible, but it's kind of difficult. The reason that Kyurem's like reasonable against Lugia is because they don't have mana fee, and so you like it's not that difficult to Kyurem 2 turns in a row, or at least like Kyurem attack because you don't have to waste resources playing Prime Catcher Cologne. You can just straight up Kyurem their boards. So you can like reasonably play for these Kyurem plans. I'm trying to think. All my games against Lugia were like really different because I think it matters a lot what they have on the board, what they attack with. Like a lot of games, you're in a weird situation, and so you just like, try to like you bring something in the active and you kind of stall it out. Like you like 200 1,000 Divinity and then hope they don't draw Boss plus energy off of Iona to 2 or something, because then you win the game next turn by taking 4 or 6 prize cards. So I think it matters a lot on what they bench. 2/2/2 is like a pretty reasonable line. That's what you usually want to go for. But also, sometimes you can pick apart their board with Kyurem. And I think the Dragapult play is an important one to know, the Kyurem Dragapult for 4 prize cards. But other than that, I don't think there's too many other crazy plays. I'm trying to see if there's anything I'm forgetting. I mean, you think Squawk early is pretty good. Don't use Squawk and Cleffa because then they can go Cleffa and they can amp Squawk. But yeah, I think the games that you're behind, usually I try to pressure either the energy by killing. I try to pressure energy by either killing Lugia or Archeops. So they have like Legacy on Lugia, I probably won't kill it. If they don't, I probably kill it just to force them to Primal Turbo more energy out of their deck, and then I can maybe trap something later. Or if I can knock out an Archeops, that's pretty good as well because it reduces the acceleration. But then the Lugia can just go for a boss knockout, which is why I think I usually move the Lugia. But sorry, it's not. This matchup is the one that's the least flowcharty. You're probably always going to win the game in 3 attacks, but the most important thing is just being able to acknowledge all of the different ways that you can win and thinking outside of the box with Kyurem and Dragapult and finding the ways that you can like use them in the correct order to proc gift energy the least, only need temple once, and sometimes you just have to V-star back, but pretty much proc gift the least, only use temple once, and then make it the hardest for your opponent to win. I guess that's what you should be thinking about through the game.
Yeah. I think the simplest way to play like the early game is just play it in any way that means Minccino isn't like easily killing your Regidrago. So like even Gudra can actually be helpful to like
definitely
if they have zero energy on Minccino, but if that's their board and I mean a lot of the time you like can't cure him. So like going Gudra into Lugia can be helpful, but it does make like things more difficult later on. For sure.
You can also you can Dragapult that little guy if they only have one, which is like pretty good, right? I mean, like the problem with doing that is like it's kind of an irrelevant damage everywhere else. Like I mean, if you Dragapult that, you have 200 damage on Lugia VSTAR, which is like fine, or you probably have like 170 because of gift, which is fine. You can clean that up later, but it's not amazing. You have to, I think, almost always have to die 3 more times from that spot. Because you're never gonna take. I mean, I guess you could like Dragapult 2 more times, but
I think that generally the plan after that is if they have Lumineon, you go hit Archeops, hit Lumineon, and then cure them, both of them, take 4.
True. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There's also
that's also pretty reasonable.
Yeah, can be blocked. It is like more annoying because it can be blocked by mist, and then you need to block. Yeah, it's also worth keeping in mind. Yeah, but they can have. You have to like block Legacy / V-Guard on the final turn, and then also you have to get around Mist for like the turn that you're hitting Archeops and putting damage on Lumineon. So there is like problems here. But yeah, I mean,
I mean, sometimes like Lugia is a deck where if they draw perfectly, they can definitely beat you.
Yeah,
and so sometimes if you're behind, you have to just say they're gonna miss something, or like I said, like the biggest thing is just minimizing the amount of cards they draw. I think in general, like not taking a knockout's pretty good. They should play Serendipity. So Also, a lot of games like not opening up bench space is pretty good. Their bench space is pretty clogged, and so like leaving their bench is kind of nice. It is also worth remembering this doesn't always come up, but it's usually bad. But they can aqua return, and so if your entire
Yeah.
game plan is around putting like leaving damage on fish, and they have legacy left, just remember that they can shuffle it back in and make it harder for you. Like usually it's okay because you can like then just remove their Archeops and they lose the game instantly, but that is sometimes a play which can make it difficult. So just think about that.
It's especially a problem if, you know, the like good scenario happened and they missed boss and then they're hitting you
Yeah.
for 220 and then they've got the aqua return, which is can make things a lot harder. But
Mhm.
yeah, hopefully there was enough informative things there.
Yeah. Also, Cleffa's really good. Like I said, you can't Cleffa and Squawk, but usually you have to use one of them. And Cleffa is significantly better. Like if you start Teal Dance, then in pretty much every matchup, but this one definitely, I would play towards going for Cleffa on turn one and forcing your opponent to have the big bundle knockout, which like they get sometimes, but it's one more piece they need. Sometimes you can bench Radzard, usually you can't, but even if they can bundle around it, it's just one more piece they need to get throughout their turn. So, pretty good.
Yeah, playing around bundle definitely important as well. Yeah. All right. I think we should move on to the next matchup, which we're going to talk about, the Regidrago Mirror. Yeah, this matchup's definitely pretty flowcharty, but yeah, what's your ideas on like how you take prizes and stuff in this one?
Yeah, so like you said, pretty flowcharty matchup. It kind of depends on how the flow of the game is going, what chart you take. There's like two different things you can do. The first one is you don't take prize cards, and the second, and you do Dragapult checkmates. The second one is you are just like bashing your head in a Giratina War. I think both of them come up fairly often. There's some like mix between them, I guess, but you're pretty much going to try to take two prize cards every single turn. As you saw on stream with Yoshi, that can sometimes be like you can do cool things with Kyurem, right? Like sometimes you can Kyurem for 6 in 2 turns, but that does not happen very often. You need an Ogerpon active. You need them to have Pheasantipity, Mew, Squawk, 2 of those 3 on the bench. But if they do that, then playing for that play is really good. Like if your opponent's up 2, that is the pretty much the only way you can guarantee that you have a win before they do. But the other ways that you can win, getting the first attack off on a 2-prizer in general is going to put you ahead in the game. Now, if you 200 into a Regidrago V, it's going to be more difficult to win. 200 into a Teal Mask is pretty good because you can just go Giratina into Howlucha Radzard and finish off the game. Or I guess Giratina into like Howlucha Giratina. But Radzard's a little bit easier to pull off. One important thing is if I get the first attack off with Dragapult on anything, like probably a Teal Mask or something, or I don't know, maybe that's my only attacker. I don't want to really Giratina this Regidrago V. But if you're using Dragapult in the matchup, then you pretty much always want to put 30-30 on the 2 Regidrago Vs. So this is like the one game plan, I guess, that's kind of interesting. So you can 200 their Teal Mask, if they have it or anything active, or a Mew or a Squawk or whatever. You can 200 it, and then 30-30 the 2 Regidrago Vs. They have to attack you with Regidrago VSTAR. And then you can use Dragapult, which puts them up to 230, and then you can put 10 damage on either a Pheasantipity or a Teal Mask or something on their bench. And then on the final turn, you can Gust and Dragapult a third time, and you can knock out the Teal Mask with 10, the Regidrago with 230, and the Teal Mask with 200, and then take all 6 in one turn. So that's a pretty good strategy. You can never get Iono'd, and so you know that you're always, if you do, you draw 6, right? So it doesn't matter, right? You're always drawing 6 of Iono. And all you need to do is stream 3 Regidrago VSTAR. That's it. You can VSTAR for those cards. I mean, I guess you need 1 Gust, but you need 1 Gust and 3 Regidrago VSTARs. So that's a pretty reasonable plan. If your opponent goes into Gudra, then like, I don't really think that changes anything. You're still ahead in the price rate, I think. Maybe I need to Gust. Let's see. Do I need to Gust if they Gudra? Maybe I need to Gust if they Gudra. So maybe you need an additional Gust if they Gudra on their turn. I do, right? Yeah, because they can go. I just sack your active. What, you have 50 HP left? Wait, actually,
we've got a lot of health.
80.
We've got like 130 after that point, so. Oh wait, you can I guess.
If I did 30, yeah, that's what I was thinking. If there's 30 on it, then I can Giratina it, which puts it to 50 left, and then I can still Lucha Dragapult for game the next turn.
Yeah.
So if they Gudra, it's still okay. You just have to Giratina it, and then you can win the game the next turn with those. So like that Dragapult play is pretty good. The other play is if you're behind, then almost always your best play is going to be to knock out their VSTAR. At least that's what I found. I found that if I tried to like not take knockouts, it would draw out of Iono and win the game. So the best play is to go into Giratina V-Star, take a knockout, or Giratina V-Star knock out their active, and then try to go with Radzard Iono on one of the final turns of the game to hopefully they miss at some points. The 30-30 spread is also really good because it enables you to use the Radzard. Like, it allows you to Radzard kill the Regidrago V-Star, which can be pretty important in some games. If your opponent took the first 2-prize knockout, like, with Radzard and Cleffa, like, you force them to not only have, like, a good enough setup to take a 2-prize knockout, but you force them to... They really want to save Prime Catcher, which is really hard because they have to get around Cleffa in the early game. If they do get around Cleffa in the early game, then you can't Radzard. Because if you Radzard, they'll just Dragapult for 2. But if you didn't use Cleffa in the early game, then having Radzard in the late game really forces them to have V-Star or Prime Catcher left. Because if they don't, it's going to be hard for them to use 3 Dragos in a row. Or at least 2 Dragos in a row with Gust on that turn. So, yeah, sometimes you lose because you go second, your opponent draws the nuts. But I guess the biggest thing is I actually didn't mention Cleffa yet. Cleffa's like the biggest thing in the mirror. That card's so broken. Like, going second, like, even if you Squawk and Cleffa, like, I mean, just being able to retreat into a 1-prize Pokemon where you force your opponent to burn additional resources is so good. I went 4-1 in the mirror, and I should have went 5-0, but I went 4-1 in the mirror, in part because I was able to play patient with Cleffa. I was okay with my opponent. I wasn't, like, happy with my opponents going ahead, but if my opponents went ahead, I could trust that it was because they burned a ton of resources, and so then I would be able to come back into the game by going Giratina plus Iono plus Radzard plus Iono or something, because they just needed to extend so much. Because if I went first, hopefully I would get an attack on turn 2, but if I didn't, like, even if I missed an attack on turn 2, like, let's say that I Cleffa'd, my board was so set up by them because of my Cleffa that I still have my V-Star left, so I can do whatever I want for the rest of the game, and I force my opponent to draw perfectly going second without Cleffa, which is pretty difficult. Especially if they retreat into 1-prize or like how Lucha, they need 1 more card. Maybe they just pray I don't get an attack off. But yeah, Cleffa just makes the matchup so... Like, it definitely makes the matchup in your favor because you have an ability to just chill, draw more cards, set up your board that your opponent doesn't have, and that forces them to draw 1 element better because you're always going to have your V-Star left, or you're always going to be able to draw the mid-hands in the middle of the game. Like, at least on the first turn. Like, I mean, if you draw... What happened to me in the 1 mirror I lost was I drew a brick off a random Iono. Like, I had my V-Star left, and I had Pheasantipity, and then I bricked off on Iono to 4, which is crazy. But if that does not happen, then you're in a pretty good spot. So I hope I kind of explained mirror decently. Those are kind of the main lines that I go for, and a little bit of an explanation on why Cleffa is really good. But if you play mirror with Cleffa, you'll realize how important, or at least how useful the card is.
Yeah, I would say you definitely need, at the very least, I'm not certain which one's better, but you need at the very least Cleffa or Gudra, because the Gudra kind of helps you against Cleffa because you're using a little bit more resources, but you're not like getting burned as much because your Drago doesn't die immediately. I think...
Sure. I mean, I think you usually... I don't know about you. You should still lose if you Gudra Cleffa. Like, against Kaiwan, I was so frustrated. I had him checkmated, but I threw. Like, I miscounted your prize cards. Because if you Gudra my Cleffa, I can 200 you, and then I can Gust Dragapult and twice. Which is not the easiest thing, right? I need to get 3 Regidrago V-Stars and Gust twice. But I used Cleffa, and so I probably drew a ton of cards, and that's all that I need to do throughout the game, so I can like count my resources effectively. And so, I mean, it does make me need more. So if you don't have Cleffa, you probably should play Gudra, but I think that Cleffa is still superior, as well as having, like, I think, better uses in other matchups. But yeah, Gudra definitely does make you... I mean, like, Gudra is okay in the mirror. Like, it opens up lines that you don't have without Gudra. I just think that you'll win those games anyways the majority of the time if you play optimally. So
sure,
a large majority of the time. Like, I don't think your win percentage goes like I said, I went really positive in a mirror, and most of my opponents had Gudra. But yeah, it could have been because I was playing better. It could have been because I had Cleffa. There were a lot of different reasons, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I would also say one thing that I think we discovered is, I don't know what your opinion on this is, but generally in the you don't want to bench Pheasantipity too early, or like you want to be very protected against, like, obviously that Kieran plays. And I think the best way to do that is trying to avoid benching Pheasantipity early and playing it only when it's actually drawing cards. Yeah, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you should never have 2 supervisors down that are... You should never have Sensitivity Mew squawk 2 of them down before taking a knockout, because then you open up the Kyurem play.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should just never do that. And you almost left it to squawk. So you just sometimes you have to do without Mew. But like that is definitely better than opening up like a really easy route to win for your opponent.
Yeah.
So just don't bench it and give your opponent that out. In general, benching like waiting for sensitivity is like pretty decent. I mean, like I would probably just bench it if it's in your hand, or I mean even like pre-benching it's like fine. But it also is good. Like your opponent wants to knock it out. It is the best card on your bench once your opponent's going to take a knockout. And so having that, in your deck so you can get it out later is pretty big. Also, it shuts off some cute Dragapult plays. But yeah, I mean, the big thing is do not bench it, because if you do and you get Kyurem'd, you're going to be really sad. So yeah, I think that was kind of I came to the same conclusion. Maybe for like, you can't bench it early because of that. And in general, even like you said, I guess benching it early is not amazing. It can be a dead bench spot. Like a lot of games, you don't really know if you're going to need sometimes you do, but in Mirror, you don't know if you're going to need Pheasantipity or Mew sometimes. Like, sometimes your opponent might just pray that you brick and not take a knockout, and then you might need Mew. And so leaving that bench phase something can be pretty big. By the end of the game, you can tell, but in the middle of the game, it gets a little bit questionable. So that's a good thing to leave yourself to options.
Sure. I think one thing, like, we were playing Gudra Mirror, so like, and one of the best plays in the late game was to go Prime Catcher, Pheasantipity, Iono, and then force you to draw the energy plus the extra card. So that was like,
that's like huge. Like if you don't have Mew down, then I mean that's a way you can buy back a turn like super easily. So yeah.
So yeah, Pheasantipity not as good for that reason, but
yeah, I like Mew's generally better in Mirror. Sometimes you have to go Pheasantipity to draw. Like, I mean, you just have to, but
and sometimes it's really good. But...
yeah. I mean, like I used it both games against Yoshi, and like I used it definitely like it helped me in some mirrors. But like Mirror is one of the biggest matchups where they can make it awkward with not killing stuff, and so most decks can't do that. But that makes Pheasantipity a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to the Guardy matchup. So this matchup is kind of interesting. I think a lot of the time it goes the same ways, but things can definitely goes the same way. But yeah, things can. They have a lot of different strats, and so like, how do you think you deal with it, and like, what do you think are the main things you're trying to do?
So in the Gardevoir matchup, your goal is going to be Dragapult on turn 2 without using your VSTAR. If you do that, then you should win almost every time. Like you're just going to be in such a good spot if you have your VSTAR left, because that allows you to cure him at the end of the game, take your last 3. So your flowchart's usually going to be, you're going to want to go Dragapult on turn 2, knock out whatever their active is, and whenever you're spreading damage on bench, you want to put 20 on each of the, like you want to go 20 Curlia, 20 Curlia, 20 Ralts. That's the best spread. That's the only spread that guarantees you a 2-price turn the next turn, unless they do something weird, like double Monkey Dory, which is not possible, or don't evolve their Ralts into Curlia, and then, and then Bravery Charm it. But 20-20-20 is just the best split I found. So you want to do that, and also I would really heavily go for the Dragapult on turn 2. Like use Squawkabilly. I mean, if you need to use Cleffa, do what you can to get a turn 2 Pult without using your VSTAR, because it puts you in such a good spot. So you're gonna Pult, you're gonna put 2/2/2, and then if they used Evolution or if they went first, then they can respond to you. So there's a bunch of different things they can do, like you said. If they play Cresselia, they can Crest, and that's one way that the 20-20-20 doesn't guarantee you a 2-price turn. But if they Crest, then you're usually still fine, because they didn't confuse you. You have a guaranteed attack, it's whatever. The most common thing I think is they're gonna go for Monkey Dory. So they're gonna probably go Unfair Stamp, Monkey Dory, and pray with Confusion that you don't draw out of it. And this is where our favorite bench sitter Mew comes in. Mew is absolutely really, really good in this matchup. Pokestuff's also really, really good in this matchup, because if you're Prime Catcher on this turn, then you almost just win, right? You're in a really good spot with the Dragapult. You can always flip heads on Confusion and get 2 prize cards and win. But if you don't, it's better to find a switch or Prime Catcher. You can switch a Prime Catcher, take 2 more prize cards with Dragapult, and then at this point you're at 3 prize cards. They're at 6, and there's not much damage on your board, and you have Kyurem left, and it's really hard for them to play out of that. Sometimes they can play out of it by like evolving up, or they just naturally don't have Pokemon in play. But that very rarely happens. If they have like so few Pokemon in play that that's the case, then you can often gust their only Gardevoir or gust their only Kirlia and make it extremely difficult for them to close the game, or like their only Monkey Dory. Um, that's like the pretty general game plan. Almost always it will follow some sort of this game plan, or Gardevoir will miss somewhere along the way, and then you just kind of instantly win. The only way, or like the big way, like this game can get awkward. The first thing is you really do not want to cure them early. Like curing early is pretty terrible. Sometimes it's good. Like, I mean, if you're, I mean, I guess curing double Curly Ralts is like probably good, but
Even then, dude.
even in that situation, it's like pretty bad. Like you just don't need to. Discarding the energy is just not worth it. That's like how you let Gardevoir win is by using Kyurem, and then they unfair stamp you and reestablish a mediocre board. But then your board is so bad you like maybe you have to V-Star to attack like in 2 turns, and then it just like falls apart. So like even if you're gonna do that, just Prime Catcher, kill a Curlia, spread damage on their bench, and then cure them for your last 3. Like it, you just don't like the way that people lose this matchup is by using cure them too early. The other way that you lose it is like if you have a slow start and then Gardevoir's able to develop, they can go for plays where they like 190 are active with a Gardevoir that doesn't have damage on it or like only has 20 damage on it. It's pretty hard for them to get there, but if they can do that, then they can go like 190 Monkey Dory into Drifloon kill double Monkey Dory, and that's like the scariest thing they can do. So yeah, just I guess if they're in that situation, I usually hunt down the Monkey Dory. I mean, you have to. You really cannot afford to lose to a double Monkey Dory. But that's like definitely the scariest part of the matchup, I guess, is like they go confuse, put 90 on you, and then or like 60 on you plus probably 20 from the move from their ability, so you're at 80. And then the next turn they're gonna go move damage, knock out with Gardevoir EX, and this is the turn where you want to cure them. If you can't cure them, then you should probably just go Iono plus kill Kirlia, and you should almost you should be in a good spot from there. But that's the only time it gets scary, I think, is whenever they are able to not just lose to Dragapult rushing them down, which doesn't happen very often, but if they don't lose to that and they can get a full health Gardevoir EX attacking into you, then it gets a little bit shaky because you obviously can't one-shot that. But one cool play is that I in testing I was using Teal Dance like Ogerpon a reasonable amount to kill the Gardevoir at the end of the game. Because if they're going for the Monkey Dory play and like they're like setting up to try and go for a no damage Gardevoir, then you have time just to like stack a bunch of energy on one Teal Mask, and they can't like go around your Regidrago. Like I mean, I guess they could, but like if they go around your Regidrago to kill your Teal Mask with like 3 or 4 energy, it's like kind of fine. And it's actually pretty reasonable if you have your V-Star left to stack up a Teal Mask just to blow up one big Gardevoir. So that's something to think about. But just kind of rambling about how the matchup can go wrong. But in general, it's a pretty, you want to go take a bunch of prizes with Dragapults, spread damage to knock out their Curlias, and then you can save your V-Star so you can cure them Cologne for your last 3 prize cards.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I think that we were only running 1 Dragapult, so maybe this is like only a play that we only came up with is like Goodra can work if you just sit around and Goodra for like a bunch of turns, you keep your Regidrago alive, you keep your V-Star, and then you end the game with Cologne after like not doing much for like the rest of the entire game. But like that was pretty rare. The other problem that we had is with Mimikyu in general. Like just getting hit by Mimikyu and stuff like that can be a problem. Do you have any thoughts on dealing with Mimikyu? Have you had that as a problem or not really?
Yeah, so Mimikyu, there are some times when Mimikyu is really good. Like, so the time when Mimikyu is really broken. Oh, sorry. This is one other thing I didn't mention is attacking on turn 1's pretty good against Gardevoir. Like, if you start Teal Dance, then you can 1 E-switch, take a 1-prize knockout, and then you pretty much guarantee get another 1-prize knockout. That's also pretty good. I mean, it puts their board under more pressure, right? You're removing things earlier. So if you have a chance to do that, then I think it's pretty good. And then one other thing is I also, whenever you're taking the knockout with Dragapult, it's sometimes they don't bench another Regidrago V. Sometimes Counter Catcher is the only way you lose the game. But like if you're attacking with Teal Mask, sometimes they don't bench a second V early because then Counter Catcher spelling can be the only way you lose the game. So just something to keep in mind is like something to do that. But
agreed.
So Mimikyu gets really annoying if they go first and then they can retreat into it and Evo with it. Like if they draw that well, it's like You can still win, but it's definitely difficult, right? Because
Hmm.
you now cannot drag a Bolt for a prize card that turn, and so you have to like just spread damage on their bench. Um, Sometimes it makes you can come over at the end of the game and be annoying, but whenever I tested against it, I never felt like it was like super prohibitive. Like it would maybe make me play the game in a different way, where I would prioritize getting 10 damage on the Mimikyu, or I would be very cautious of having my canceling cologne and like enough bosses left in my deck. Like sometimes you don't really care about having those cards left, but I would be more cautious about it. But I don't think it changes too much. Whenever I played the matchup, if I went for Mimikyu as Gardevoir, then I lost more of the time than if I went for Monkey Dory, because all my opponent needed was a boss, and then they take the two prize turn, and then I'm just so far behind. So yeah, that was at least my experience. Was the card is annoying if they draw well enough, but like if they retreat into it going second, if they don't evo, I think you don't really care. Like
Hmm.
you can probably get around it, like or cologne kill it. But if you can't,
Yeah.
even just spreading damage when they didn't evo is completely fine. You can just take out double curly and extra to win the game. So I guess that was my thoughts against it. Like we tried it and it was okay. Mimikyu's definitely a good card in the deck in general,
Hmm.
but it was not anything game changing. I mean, obviously I didn't play Gardevoir, so yeah,
Yeah, I'll definitely like echo the statement on the second Regidrago V. I think this is also part of the reason that we came up with this like Guru thing is because like
for sure.
sometimes also yeah, having one Regidrago is really risky, but yeah, having the Regidrago V down, especially when you're down like Switch and Prime Catcher, which
Hmm.
can sometimes happen.
Hmm.
Um, like you really don't want a V started attacking you. It's kind of annoying. Like, and yeah, they're usually gonna hit it for 190 as well. Unless you have anything else to say about that matchup.
No, that's good.
We'll move on to the Raging Bolt matchup. Definitely probably one of the most difficult matchups for Regidrago, and also is pretty random. What's your experience in this matchup, and yeah, what do you think you do?
Yeah, so I like going first in this matchup. If you go second, then your opponent will take a knockout. Um, Pretty much guaranteed on turn two. They can attach twice to bolt, and then they can almost always get a turn two knockout. If you go first, they don't always get a turn one knockout. And even if they do, their board's going to be less developed than if they went first. So sometimes you go first, they miss a turn one knockout, and then you just win the game on the spot, which is like pretty good. If you go second, then you just give them so much more time to set up their board. Like they have an extra turn to Teal Dance a bunch of times, and Greninja, and attach energies, and then their board is more developed. Their deck is going to be thinner for later in the game, so it's harder to win. So his bolting and get a turn one knockout feels great, but it's much less easy to do that than it is to take a turn two knockout going first. And so that's why I like going first. Matchup's not too crazy. You like pretty much your entire game plan is going to be using Radiant Charizard after they take a two prize knockout. So the two prize knockout, you're going to go E switch attach, Radzard kill, and that's like your entire game plan. You need to make sure you bench another one prizer because they can use bundle if you don't. So kill with Radzard, bench a one prizer so they can't bundle, take for two, and then if they don't hit boss, if they kill your Radzard, you should just win. You can either V-Star back the Radzard, E-Switch knockout, and then finish out with a third Radzard, or you can just go Giratina, finish out with Radzard. One of those two plays is fine. If they do Gust around your Radzard, then you just go Iono, attack with Radzard again, and hopefully they don't hit Gust again.
Mhm.
That's pretty much how the matchup goes.
Yeah, generally you're trying to kill like Mew EX or Pheasantipede is what I'd say as well on the turns that you can.
Sure, sure. Yeah, it's kind of hard because you don't really have the luxury of playing Prime Catcher because you're already so strapped to like attack with Radzar with double E
Yeah.
switch attached. But at the end of the game, Prime Catcher killing Fez is definitely huge. You can
Mhm.
also like if they because it's not that easy for the deck to gust. Sometimes when they gust, they leave their board pretty bad, and so you can go like Gust Fez Dragapult 200 spread damage, and that can be a decent play. Um, Instead of going for the Radzard knockout.
Yeah.
Usually, I think it's better to Radzard kill it, just because like gusting for them multiple turns in a row is not very easy. But there are some situations it's worth thinking about going attack, don't take a prize card, and then take for the next turn. I know Gudra's decent in that situation as well, right? You can
Yeah.
like 200 a Fez with a Gudra, and then how Lucha finish the game. And I guess they can hit switch card, but hopefully they
Well,
didn't. So
one
yeah.
what requires the one extra yeah, one extra energy. But
Yeah. It's pretty hard for them to hit like the switch card one shot knockout in that situation. Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes it just requires the gust as well, plus like the extra energy, which can be
Mhm.
helpful, I mean, in some situations. I don't know what you
Yeah.
think, but a lot of the time we decided that you're supposed to go motivate with Squawkabilly. If going
Mhm.
second, because yeah, I mean, as you said, like hitting this whole E switch thing, you're pretty strapped for resources. Going motivate can be helpful. Um, I guess you ran Cleffa,
I
so that's like a bit of a difference.
Yeah, I Clefa'd.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Sure.
my play was Cleffa plus attached to Radzard. If they took a knockout on my active, then I felt pretty solidly that I'd be able to win the game. Like I felt pretty solid that I could string three attacks together, even if I attached for turn to Radzard.
Yeah.
And if they Gust killed my Drago, then it just made it infinitely easier to just go one attach, one E switch. So yeah, my plan was Cleffa with Radzard attachment on bench, and then this matchup's really weird. This is like the only matchup I think where you only play like you play with like a really weird bench. Your bench is like two one prizers, like two one prizers, and then probably Squawk, and then one Regidrago V, and then two in combination of Teal Mask plus one prizers. I actually only bench one V most of the time in this matchup, Regidrago V, sorry, because Radjar's my main attacker, and so I don't need to worry about building up multiple Regidragos. Regidrago is good because you need to find Iona with it, but I still only usually bench one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just gonna be uh I don't have the bench space for all that I want, and so I would rather have an extra Teal Dance or Pheasantipity or Mew or something on the board as opposed to that second Regidrago V-Star whenever I don't need it to attack.
Yeah, I agree that that's probably like roughly what your board should look like. Fizz is great in this matchup, but yeah.
Very good. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, relatively like straightforward matchup for the most part.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we can move straight to Snorlax. Definitely can be a complicated matchup. I think the best place to start is what do you want your board to look like in this matchup?
I played a lot against Snorlax. It was a deck that we really heavily considered. Reagan and John played it. Unfortunately, had some pretty unlucky beats, not do so well. But this matchup is terrible if the Snorlax player is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is really bad. I think it's like 70 if they're good. Um,
Sure.
Temple's like annoying, but if they're good, it's not going to matter too much. So I found that the only way that I could win the matchup was going really fast, and so I think this is kind of like a misconception against Snorlax. People think that the best way to win the game is by not benching Squawk or like things that can get trapped, but that's wrong
Mm-hmm.
because if you give Snorlax time, then you are going to lose no matter what you do. Like if you let them miss Fortune Sisters and area your hand and play flutes and stuff, you're going to lose. And so the best way to play the matchup is try to attack on turn two. Hopefully you start a V, then you don't need to play switch to attack on your first turn, and then benching Squawk, using it to draw cards, guarantee you can get an attack the next turn, is what I found to be by far the best way to play the matchup. So your board is just kind of whatever it is, but you need to make sure you have Mew on your board. Mew's extremely big in the matchup. It allows you to attack Mimikyu if it doesn't have a mist, or if you have Temple, it allows you to attack Ogerpon, which is otherwise kind of a big problem. So you need Mew down. You want Squawk down. Ideally, you only have one Regidrago V-Star down because they're actually going to probably countercatcher your Regidrago V-Star. Um, like eventually, their board might get to a state where they have a lot of Mimikyu and Cornerstone in play, and if they just keep countercatching your Regidrago V-Star, if you have two in play, it's going to be really hard to like move it multiple times. So only one Regidrago if possible, and then Mew, and then a Teal Mass or even like Hawlucha and Cleffa are fine.
Sure. Yeah, I think that yeah, it's just like yeah, you avoid benching like the Radzard Kyurem stuff. Like it's all that's like the main
Yeah,
thing in the
sure.
matchup.
Yeah, I mean more than one retreat cost is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that is the big thing. Like you just want to try to get your bench to be all one retreaters. Like which is why squawking really is pretty good. I mean,
Mm.
you just have to hope they don't flute one of your guys before you can full bench your bench with Teal Mass and Mew and all that stuff. But usually they do, and it gets really, really bad. But much better chance to win if you hope they don't, and if they don't. So that's the big thing. I think. But yeah, in general, the match is just about going fast, like taking knockouts, bossing Rotom. Like if they have cape on Rotom, you can't one shot it, which is pretty lame. But bossing Rotom is good if they don't have cape, and you can pressure it somewhat. If they don't have mist on their Rotom, you can drag a bolt onto it, or you can go for the Howlucha boss play sometimes. But that play is not particularly easy to do. But sometimes you can get there. You can like Howlucha 10 on there, you can boss two idiots, and then you get a knockout. Um, but it really is just attacking pretty much every turn. Uh, it gets weird at the end because you're not just trying to save your switching cards. Like your main opponent in the matchup is going to be the Mimikyus and the Cornerstones. It's
Mhm.
not going to be the Snorlaxes. But the problem is that they have so many different ways they can attack you, right?
Mhm.
So that's why, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the biggest thing is just go aggressive, power up Mew because Mew's going to be big for taking down Mew, Mimikyu, and Cornerstone. Kill Rotom if you can. Whether that's using Hawlucha, if you need to, try to do that. If your board won't always have a space, usually won't. But if you can do that, and then save your V-Star for later in the game. Like it's really, really bad to V-Star early. It's almost always better to pass one turn as opposed to pop your V-Star early and allow them to, well, first of all, you discard 7 cards, and maybe you discard even more good resources. And then second of all, know that anything they discard is going to be final for you. So yeah, I guess that's my like little thing on the matchup. It's pretty bad, but the best way that you can win is by going aggressive and taking down their draw, of course.
Yeah. I think that like the best way to like yeah, so the main issue with the matchup in my experience is when you like brick in the middle of the game and then are forced to use your V-Star, and it actually happens like a decent amount of the time. I think the third Iona
Sure. Yeah,
actually
yeah.
helps this matchup out like a lot. Well, not a lot,
Mhm.
like it's only one card difference, but like having like Iona and hitting researches and stuff just so you can go as fast as possible. Like it's definitely literally go as fast as physically possible. And passing a turn isn't good, but yeah, if you only have to pass one turn to not use your V-Star, that's fine. But if you have to pass, like, if your hand is fully bricked, you just have to rip the V-Star and hope for the best.
Yeah, you just have to use it. Yeah, you just can't wait. Like
Yeah.
also with the Iono, like a lot of times your best game plan is go like Temple Iono and just hope they don't find Artisan for like 2 turns.
Mhm.
And then you can like get through the Mimikyu on the board.
Yeah.
That can sometimes be the best game plan. But Moriano definitely does help the matchup. Like it's an annoying card for Snorlax. Like if you only have 2, you might play one early, and then you don't really want to V-Star back one, so you only have one for the rest of the game.
Mhm.
So having more consistent access to it and also being a little more consistent definitely is good in the matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think that's for the most part everything for the matchup. Well, it's a super complicated
Mhm.
matchup, so there's probably more things about it, but yeah, we can't cover everything. We'll move on to the last matchup that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Iron Thorns. There's more niche matchups we won't cover, but I think that these are the like most important matchups for Regidrago. And yeah, the
Mhm.
last one, Iron Thorns. I don't have a ton of experience in this matchup. I don't know a ton about it, so hopefully you know a little bit about it. Yeah, how do you think that this matchup generally goes?
Yeah, so this matchup's like fine. One of the reasons I dropped Thorns is because I didn't. I mean, I was beating Drago, but not super consistently.
Mhm.
Uh, Clef was really big in the matchup, though. Like a lot of the time, you want to Clef up because your opening hands are just horrible, and usually your ball cards they can't get you anything. But when you have Cleffa, they can you Cleffa, and so it's not great to waste your attachment retreating into it, which you have to do sometimes. But it allows you to not have a terrible hand. So Clef is really good because otherwise they can brick you. You can get out of that a little bit. What I would do in the matchup is I would wait. I would leave a Regidrago V on the bench and start attaching energy to it. Force him to have like boss to pressure it early, and then if I could, I would also go into Squawk and I would motivate pretty aggressively to attach extra energy to my guy. Uh, yeah, that's pretty much what my game plan was. My game plan was attach to Regidrago early. Their deck is kind of slow, so hopefully I'll get enough time to get 3 energies in a Regidrago by the time that they attacked it, and then I could kind of pressure them. Obviously, the big card is canceling Cologne, right? Whenever you
Yep.
draw Cologne, you can play Cologne, you can pop off, Teal Dance, switch, energy switch, get an attack off. And then the weird thing is that, like, with this deck, V-starring on, like, turn, there's, like, the game basically has, like, 4 turns in this format, right? And
Yeah.
you can V-star on 3 of them, all of them except for the first one. V-starring on the first turn is usually fine, V-starring on the third turn is usually fine, but V-starring on the second turn is pretty bad because like that's the turn where your deck is like a mediocre size, and so you have resources in there that you kind of like want. But if you have to do it, that turns pretty awkward. That happens a lot against Iron Thorns because the game is a lot slower, and so you almost certainly have to go Cologne V Star in the middle of the game, and sometimes you discard bad cards and it's really awkward. But yeah, I mean you can't really do anything. You just whenever you draw Cologne, play it, flood your board with energies, E switch, attack with Regidrago V Star. Ogerpon's also a pretty good attacker in the matchup. Like just if you have Teal Dances, on that Cologne turn, you can energy up on that. And then my usual game plan was just to attack with one Regidrago, go, what's it called? Dragapult, try to take 4 prize script with that, and then finish up the game with my Teal Mask because it could not get stuck in the active if my opponent played like a counter catcher or a boss or something to prime catcher to try to leave it there for a turn. I could just stack energies in my Teal Mask to finish off the game and then use my one Regidrago. If they gust hit your Regidrago early, then you don't have that option. You have to match a second one, which is totally fine. You can like try and power it up. You can motivate to it, but usually my game plan was go with one big Drago. Hopefully it can take enough prize cards. If it can't, set up a second one and then finish up the game with a Teal Mask.
Yeah, sure. Makes a lot of sense. And do you think that off the V-Star, are you generally trying to get back Cologne, or is that not something that you're doing very often?
It's kind of close. I find that it's not something I do because I find that my resources are already so pressed after the Cologne turn that if I take back Cologne, it doesn't really do too much for my board. I find like if I take Cologne, maybe I can draw a few more cards, but it doesn't really, I don't really like super need it. So I usually take like Superior Prime Catcher or something like that, or sorry, like Rod Prime Catcher. But there are definitely games where you can get back the Cologne. It is important to remember that by getting back Cologne, you give yourself another turn of accelerating more energies, and it really protects you against Crushing Hammer and stuff like that. So uh, probably like a third of games to get back Cologne, so not every game, but it is definitely something important to keep in mind.
30 games you don't even get Cologne, so it's like half of them.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I don't. Unless you have anything else to say for that matchup, I don't think I have anything else either. I think you covered it for the most part.
Yeah, I don't think so. That was pretty much my strategy going into it. I didn't play too many games in the matchup. I just kind of had a basic strategy and I knew what I was going to do. So yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Yeah, floor is yours to say anything that you want to say. Like if like plug anything you want to plug, your Twitter, whatever, anything else. Go ahead.
Yeah, so want to plug my Twitter at Isaiah Bradner. You can go follow me on there. Also, I'm going to try and start streaming a little bit in the fall because I'm back done of school. So check out Bradner Blastoise on Twitter. Hopefully, some streams will be coming up sometime in the next few weeks. Also, I'm doing a Regidrago VSTAR class on Metafy. This video was super informative, but I'm going to go even more in depth, going to give you even more next level plays, make your deck even better for the upcoming tournaments. If you're interested in that, go check it out on Metafy. If you thought that this was good, that class will be even more structured, even better. You'll learn even more. So definitely check that out. And then finally, shout out to the best sleeves in the game, Dragon Shield. If you want to buy Dragon Shield, use Bradner5 as a code. Buy the black non-glares, those are the goats. But yeah.
Thank you, Bradner.